morning. I hope you can all hear me well. You could just give me some emoji reaction here so that I know you can hear me. We're going to give it a couple of minutes to let everybody um, join the meeting, and then we're going to get going here. This is going to be a 1 hour webinar, open format, so that you can ask your questions as we go along or enter them in the chat. So let's just give it a couple of minutes and then we're going to get going. Please make sure as you come into into WebEx, make sure that your line is muted so that we don't have any background noise. We have so far about 20, a little bit over 20 participants that have joined. We have a total of 41 people that have enrolled, so we're just waiting a few minutes.
Good morning.
Good morning. If you could please mute your line as you come into the webinar so that we don't have any background noise as the webinar is being delivered, we would appreciate it. Okay, good morning. We're going to get going here with the webinar. Thanks for joining us. I'm Norman Wano, Deputy Director of the Office of Illinois Works, and today we're going to talk about the 2025 Illinois Works grantee renewal process, timelines, documentation, who qualifies to be renewed, and the various items that you will see if you in fact get offered renewal. So with me today is Edwin Sanchez, who's one of our programmatic grant managers, who's going to be providing some support here to this webinar. Edwin, if you don't mind, keep saying hi to the audience.
Good morning, everyone. Edwin Sanchez, pleasure to see everyone.
Thank you, Edwin. With me here today also is Monica Pruitt, who's also one of our programmatic grant managers downstate, who's also going to be providing support today. So Monica, if you don't mind saying hi to our audience.
Absolutely. Thank you, Norman. Good morning, everybody. Thanks for joining us today.
Great. Just please keep in mind this session is being recorded and will be made available to all of you in our partner guide in the next few days, the next couple of days. So if you do want to review the recording of this webinar, you can do that. Throughout this webinar, if you are interested in asking a question, we're trying to use an open format here. You can unmute your line and ask your question, or you can definitely enter your question in the chat, any questions or comments in the chat, and we'll be more than happy to address those as we go along. As I mentioned earlier, the focus of this webinar is we're kicking off the renewal process for existing Illinois Works grantees. We have a total of 37 grantees right now in our network. In grant renewal, you have an opportunity to receive a contract modification that also includes a budget modification that extends your agreement and your funding through 2026. In other words, if you get off a renewal, you will get a modification so that you can continue to run your programming starting January 1st through December 31st, 2026. We will share the details today about the renewal process, including the criteria for renewal, as well as the documents required for application and overall renewal timeline. So that's the focus of our webinar today. One of the things we want to do is find out who's here today. And if you don't mind, in the chat, please enter your name, your organization or agency that you represent. When was your original grant year? And I will ask Edwin, as those come into the chat, if you don't mind reading them off. Again, your organization name, the organization or agency you represent, and when was your original grant year? Was it 2024 or 2025?
All right, so we're starting to get some in, Norman. First is Mark Williams from Hire 360, 2025. Then Kari Selk from Associated Builders and Contractors, grant year 2025. Jasmine Bankhead, Center of Innovation, grant year 2025. Shupra Kanan, hopefully I said that right. If I mispronounced, please forgive me. Quad County Urban League, 2024. Denise Rose from Girls Light Our Way, 2025. Alejandro de la Luz, Senior Director, Workforce Development at Lewis University, grantee since 2022. Robert Beekman, Bethel Family Resource Center, 2024. Shannon Furholz from Regional Office of Education, number 51, 2025. Morgan Lovelace, also from ROE 51, 2025. Hazel Roman from Lewis University, grant year 2023. Joe Chapa from Lewis University, 2023. Amy McMorrow Hunter, the Climate Economy Education Inc., 2025. David Mungus from Youth Built Lake County, 2022. Kashmir Crump from YBLC, grantee since 2022. Cheryl Holman from Community Assistance Programs, 2024. Girls Light Our Way from 2025, and I believe that's Don Harris Jeffries based on the name in the chat. Chris Berbert from ROE number 51 as well, 2025. Alexander Gerstenecker, sorry if I mispronounced your last name, Southwestern Illinois College, grantee since 2022. Mike Conley from Southwestern Illinois College. Merrick Nish from MFS, 2022. Katrina Henderson, Quad County Urban League since 2023. And Janice Hernandez, Child First Fund / CPS 2022. Manuela Gracia from County Urban League 2023. For now, that's all we have.
Great, thank you very much. Thank you all for joining us. We hope to be able to answer any questions you may have related to this process. One of the key things to emphasize before we move on is, that the renewal process at Illinois Works, it's an invitation process, and we'll discuss the details now of how that works, but you cannot just apply for renewal with Illinois Works based on your performance and your compliance score throughout the year. that's what we use to determine who gets renewed. But do you have any questions about what we're going to be covering today in the format before we move on to the details? Edwin, let me know if you see any questions in the chat, please.
Sure thing, Norman. So far, there are no questions.
Okay, thank you. And as I mentioned earlier, if you have any questions, you can enter them in the chat, or you can certainly unmute your line when given an opportunity to do so. So in this particular section, we're going to talk about the two pathways for renewal at Illinois Works, and also discuss the criteria that we use for renewal. One key thing to keep in mind is that when it comes to renewal for Illinois Works, as I mentioned, it's an invitational process. You cannot just apply for renewal. It's only if you get invited to renew. And there are two different pathways for renewal. One is regular renewal. And for regular renewal, you have to be in good standing, which is 76% of compliance score or above. And we'll talk in a minute how that works, but we look at your compliance score in September, and then we give you a second opportunity in October to reach, if you want to be renewed as a regular renewal grantee, then you have to meet that good standing score of 76 or above. And we'll mention where you can see the score for your own organization. The second path for renewal is conditional renewal. And conditional renewal is where we may request particular conditions for your organization to be renewed. It may be a variety of different things based on the performance that we're looking at. But if you go through that path, you will have to be at 65% to 75% in compliance score in order for you to be offered conditional renewal. Again, these scores are looked at both in September, then you have a second opportunity in October to see if you can reach those scores. Anybody that is in a renewal score of less than 65% will not be offered renewal. These are the only two paths that we have for renewing your grant with Illinois Works. So as a result, I encourage you, we are right now in the process of working through the compliance reports for September. I encourage you that you look at that report. If you're not offered renewal in September, look at that report, your monthly compliance report, and address the flags, address the various issues to see if you could be offered renewal in October. And as I said, it's an invitational process. Anybody that does not reach 65% compliance will not be offered renewal. Okay, so renewal announcements. So as I mentioned, we will use both your September and October compliance scores as documented on your monthly compliance report. As you know, part of the documentation that you get from Illinois Works on a monthly basis is your monthly compliance report that comes with a payment worksheet, and it tells you how much money you have earned so far based on your performance. And it also comes with a verification sheet that tells you participant by participant what issues we may have with verifying either the enrollment, completion, or transition of your participants. That monthly compliance report has a compliance score at the top of the report, and that is the compliance score that we use to determine who gets renewed. So as I said, we're working through the September reports now. For those that in September reach the renewal thresholds I just discussed, they will receive an invitation. They will receive a letter offering renewal to them and the process that they have to follow in order to renew their funding. Obviously, if they met the criteria, if they did not meet the criteria and are not offered renewal in September, we will once again run the numbers in October and look at the monthly compliance report scores, then the compliance scores in the October reports, and then make a determination in October who else gets renewed. That's it. Those are the 2 months that we focus on, September and October. We will not look at November scores. We will not look at December scores. It's only September and October because we need several weeks to be able to process renewals, be able to go and finalize the budgets for those renewal grantees, and also be able to make grant modifications and budget modifications. If a particular grantee, and this is very important, is not offered renewal because they do not meet the compliance thresholds, you can certainly apply again through a competitive process through the NOFO competitive process in August of 2026, and when we're anticipating on releasing our next NOFO. And keep in mind that the August 2026 NOFO is for funding for 2027. So in other words, if you were not offered Illinois Works funding, but through the renewal process, but you want to continue to be a provider, you're going to have to be out a whole year to then apply in 2026 through the competitive process and see if you can get funding for 2027. Keep in mind that the renewal process is a process that we manage internally. Our grant managers, in partnership with the director's office, are the ones that manage this process. The NOFO process is a completely different process because it's a competitive process regulated by GATA. So when you apply through the NOFO process, two things you got to keep in mind. One is they will look at your compliance record with Illinois Works when you had funding before, but more importantly, it's the evaluation process there is done by independent evaluators that are not Illinois Works staff members. These are external evaluators. There are other DCO staff that get involved in that. We do not make a decision there on those applications and who gets funded. But those are the two options that you have. Either get renewal now, or if you don't, you need to be able to apply. If you're interested in remaining as a provider for Illinois Works, you will need to apply through the NOFO process. Do we have any questions, Edwin, before I continue?
No questions at this time, Norman.
Okay, great. So what happens if your organization meets, I apologize, if your organization meets the compliance, criteria, the compliance thresholds that we just discussed, you will receive a renewal or a conditional renewal letter, and it will outline all the instructions on how to submit the required renewal documentation. That is, if you met the criteria to be offered renewal or to be offered conditional renewal, you will receive a letter from our team congratulating you and then outlining the process that you need to follow in order to submit your renewal documentation. If your organization does not meet the compliance thresholds and criteria for renewal, you will then receive a renewal extension letter in September. And the renewal extension letter will indicate where you are with your compliance score, and it will also will provide some instructions on what you can do to work to achieve renewal in October. Now, keep in mind that because of the way we calculate renewal, compliance scores, is truly based on what you're doing or not doing in IWRS and reporting for all of your participants. So if there are flags for participants related to your enrollment, if there are flags in your report related to completion or transition, those will be flags that you will need to address in order for you to achieve renewal in October. Here's one recommendation that we would make to you. If you are close to achieving the renewal score of 65, we would encourage you to meet with your grant manager, and your grant manager can run some simulations of what it is that you can address quickly before the next compliance pool, so that you can meet that score. We have a tool that we use to run some simulations, and they can do that for you. But that's only for grantees that are close to meeting the score. If you're operating in the 20s or operating in the 30s in terms of compliance scores, it's very difficult for you to go from 20 or 30 to 65%, which is the minimum. It's not impossible, It is possible, but it's very difficult. But anyways, if you do not get renewed and you do receive a renewal extension letter and you are close to the score needed to renew, I encourage you to meet with your grant manager so that you can run some simulations. They can run some simulations for you.
Thank you.
Any questions at this particular moment in time, Edwin?
None in the chat, Norman.
Any questions from anybody else that would like to unmute their line related to what I just covered in terms of the paths, the criteria, in the renewal announcements? Okay, so if there are no questions, let's proceed to the next section here. Here we'll discuss the renewal process. We'll talk about the different steps in the renewal process and what happens in each of the steps, particularly what actions must be taken in each of the steps of the renewal process. So there are a total of 5 steps in the renewal process. First step, renewal document submission. Second step, evaluation. This is an internal evaluation our team does of your documents. Third step, negotiations. When it comes to negotiations, depending on what you're proposing to do, it could be an individualized negotiation or a group negotiation. We'll discuss that more in detail in a minute. Then there'll be reaching consensus on what your program renewal is going to be and what the ask is and what we can proceed. And then the final step is the agreement and budget modification, which this year we're putting together a process to accelerate it. And we'll discuss the timelines of when we want to be able to be done with this stuff. But these are the 5 steps that need to be taken in order for a successful renewal to happen. Let's talk about renewal document submission. So as I mentioned, if you are offered renewal, you will receive a letter that will indicate the documents that need to be submitted and the dates of when those need to be submitted. It's imperative that those dates and those documents all come in because otherwise we won't be able to evaluate your documentation for renewal, which will then result that even if you qualify to renew, that you won't be able to be renewed because the documents were not submitted or they were submitted late. So it's important that all the documents, and we'll discuss the documents in a minute, are submitted and that they're submitted on time. The next step is evaluation. As I mentioned, the evaluation for renewals is an internal process that we use at the Office of Illinois Works. So it will be the team at Illinois Works reviewing and evaluating your documents and making sure that they're complete, making sure that we understand what you're proposing to do and how you're proposing to do it, and ensuring that it abides by the guidance and the guidance of Illinois Works. Then the next step is the negotiation step. And as I mentioned earlier, negotiations could be a group negotiation as we have done it before, meaning we're negotiating with grantees in a group setting. As a result of that, most grantees are typically done with negotiations at that point, and they move on to finalize their budget and then move on to agreement or budget modification. One of the challenges that we have is that sometimes grantees obviously propose to do something very different, a different size cohort, different locations, different structures, and as a result, we may have to do individualized negotiations. So if you are one of those grantees where we're going to have to do individualized negotiations, we'll reach out in October, early November, and schedule a negotiation meeting with you to discuss your program. The next step is very important, and that is reaching consensus. Once we agree on what's going to be done, how it's going to be done, this step also involves ensuring that your budget is submitted and properly reflects the consensus that was reached through negotiations. We will discuss a little bit later here, but during this step, it's going to be very important that we finish those budgets on time. I can tell you that one of the challenges that we have is in finalizing budgets for our grantees. This program year, we had the unfortunate situation that some grantees took 3, 4, sometimes even 5 months to finalize their budgets. And here's the reason why that's so challenging. We cannot modify your grant agreement or your existing budget without a final new budget. Okay, so if the budget is not finalized, that is holding up the whole process. And then, grantees start asking, but why is it that my grant agreement has not been released? Well, if the budget had not taken 5 months, you would have received a grant agreement or a grant agreement modification a long time ago. But if that budget is not finalized, that grant agreement modification, that budget modification of your existing grant agreement and budget cannot take place. So very, very important that this process gets done, particularly at this step, quickly as planned. And as I mentioned, we'll discuss in a minute what we're planning to do there to accelerate that process. The next step and the final step is the grant agreement budget modification. This is where once we get a finalized budget, we pass all of that through the approval process to make the agreement modification and budget modification. We will discuss timelines later today, but we do expect for this to start at the very beginning in December so that we can have all of these agreement modifications and budget modifications in place by the end of January. So by the time you do administrative onboarding, if you do get offer renewal, you will have an agreement and a budget modified already so that you can run your program and we can start paying you for whatever metrics you're producing from there on. So that's the last step in the process, okay? And when it comes to agreement and budget modifications, I know that this is going to happen in December, but it's important that staff or individuals that are responsible for signing these documents can actually, be around to do that. We've had instances where those people are not around for months, and we have the agreement, we have the budget modification, but it cannot be finalized and executed because the individual that's supposed to sign is not around. We cannot have that. We need to make sure that this process goes seamless so that we can execute the agreement and budget modification by the end of January. Any questions, Edwin?
No questions at this time, Norman.
Okay, great. Seems like everybody is just following along. If once again, if you do have any questions, you can either enter them in the chat or unmute your line at these particular moments when I'm giving an opportunity for you to ask any questions. So if there are no questions, we're going to proceed to the renewal documents. In this section, we're going to discuss how you successfully complete these documents, what those documents are, and very importantly, your disclosure documents, which are vital for us to get approval from the director's office for your modification. This year, our team got together as part of our program improvement planning and decided to significantly reduce the documentation that needs to be submitted in order for you to be renewed. You may remember last year you had to submit a staffing plan, a curriculum plan, a marketing plan, program improvement plan. Those documents you will submit them during onboarding if you get renewed during onboarding, which is typically where we do it anyways. And here we have changed the process, and I'll mention in a minute how we've changed the process. So the first document is a GATA checklist. We will discuss in a minute why this is such an important document. The second one will be an application. The third one is the executive summary. Now, the executive summary is what's replacing all of those documents that I mentioned. So you will receive a template where you will be able to enter. There will be discrete sections in that template where we're going to be asking you about your staffing. How's your staffing going to be? How are you going to meet the required roles? There will be a discrete section for your curriculum. How are you planning to do it? Is it the same as the previous year? Is it different? What are the differences? marketing and outreach, how are you planning to do that? Is it going to be the same? If you are planning, if you're proposing to serve in another site within the same economic development district, how is that marketing going to happen, right? So that executive summary will now have discrete sections for you to describe those various things, but you will not have to submit a staffing plan or a curriculum plan or a marketing plan at this particular moment in time. That will be done during administrative onboarding, which is traditionally what we do anyways. And then obviously a budget template. This budget template, as I mentioned earlier, is going to be very important. And it really needs to reflect the best practices of budgeting for budget modifications. It is our intention that when we send out an invitation, we will also send out a memo with a job aid on how to do a budget template, how to do a budget. And then we'll talk in a minute about some of the other things we're going to be doing, but we plan to do a workshop, a hands-on workshop this time, where you'll be able to work on any budget issues that you have with the goal of in a few days finalizing that budget and have it done. And that's going to happen in November. So those are differences on how we're going to be dealing with budgets this year to accelerate that process, because as I mentioned earlier, it is typically in that budgeting process where we have real issues and it takes way too long, which then, really stalls the process of grant agreement and budget modifications. And then the last document is the disclosure documents. These are legal documents required by GATA for anybody that needs to be renewed. So let's start with the first document, which is the GATA checklist. The GATA checklist is a very important document because here's the challenge that we have. If you're on a FENLAC, if you're not in good standing with GATA, we're not going to be able to do a renewal for you. You want to be in good standing in GATA in order for us to go through the process that I just described. So this GATA disclosure and checklist would allow you to go and check and see, oh, I need to do this, I need to do that, or I need to address this, so that when you submit your application for renewal, you are in good standing. Because if you are in good standing with GATA, then we're able to do a budget modification. We do a grant agreement modification. If you're not in good standing with GATA, we are not able to do it, even if you met the criteria that I mentioned when it comes to compliance, because the system gets locked and there's not much we can do about it. So this is a very important document, and that's the reason why it's one of the documents that need to be submitted. The other document is the Illinois Works pre-apprenticeship renewal application. In this document, you will, it's an application you're submitting. Here's where you'll also submit your attachments. Remember, I mentioned that there's going to be an executive summary this time. You still have to submit a budget. You also have to submit the disclosures. This is the electronic form that you will use in order to do that. Now, the next important document is the executive summary, which I told you is a new document this year. So the executive summary, as I mentioned, replaces the work plan, program improvement plan, marketing plan, staffing plan, and curriculum plan at this moment in time. Those you will have to submit during your administrative onboarding, which takes place in February, when you meet with your grant manager and start going over those documents and making sure they all get approved. But at this particular moment in time, instead of submitting those, you will submit an executive summary, which will be a template that we will provide for you, where with discrete sections for you to address what your staffing is, what your work plan is, meaning how many cohorts are you going to planning to deliver with, how many people, what are going to be the metrics that you're proposing, right? So all of this will be part of that executive summary, and as I said, that's a new step this time, making the process a lot more streamlined and eliminating at this moment in time all of these plans that otherwise would have been submitted in the past. Okay, the next and very important document, as I mentioned, is your budget supplement. it is our goal to give you a memo with a job aid on how to put together and submit a budget uh, for renewal. The budget for renewal is different than when you originally submit a budget. Is the first year of your grant agreement. Renewal budget is different. We will put together that memo, send you a job aid, so that by the time you submit your budget to us, uh, that budget is in pretty good shape. But as I mentioned earlier, what we're going to do is during the negotiations, we will flag some items for you to address, and we'll give you some time for you to address them. And then we will also do a budgeting workshop, so a hands-on training of 2 hours where any flags that you have pending on your budget, any issues that you need to address, will need to be addressed during that workshop. That you will have an opportunity to work with our financial grant managers to address those issues. And then your final budget will be due just a few minutes after that, because obviously you have to secure signatures from your own organization. If that process is successful, and we do intend it to be successful, we would have accelerated the process for grant agreement modification and budget modification significantly. If what we're planning to do actually ends up giving us the results that we expect, we feel very confident that for all of those grantees that do not have any GATA issues, that we can have a budget modification and a grant agreement modification by the end of January, so that by the time you do administrative onboarding and start your programming, all of that is in place and we don't have to worry about that. But that it's going to be key, and it's going to be important. Even if you have your budget done, all of the other documents are good, you're all good to go. But if your GATA is not in order, if you're not current with GATA, then that's going to put a stop to all of this, because we will have a budget and we'll be ready to start a modification for you, but we will not be able to do it until all those the GATA is in good standing. Any questions about the budget template, some of these forms, Edwin?
There aren't any right now in the chat.
Okay, great. No questions today. Okay, so one thing that I want to emphasize about your budget is, let's say you are a grantee that received your grant in 2025 for the first time, and it was $400,000, and then you get invited to renew. And in this new grant year, instead of serving 40 people, you're proposing to serve 50 people. So the total grant award for your renewal budget then becomes 900,000. It's not 400,000. It's not 500,000. It's 900,000, because that 900,000 includes the money from the previous year, right? Let's assume that your grant year was not 2025, your first grant year was 2024, and in 2024 you received 400,000. In 2025 you received 500,000, and now you're requesting another 500,000. Then your total grant award for the renewal budget is 1,400,000, because that includes the first year, the second year, and now your new ask. That's the reason why the budgeting for renewals gets complicated, right? Because the budget includes the dollar amounts from the previous year, and there is the previous year and years. If you started in 2024, and there's a very particular way on how those budgets need to be done and how those budgets need to be approved. So that's the reason why it's so important. As I said, we will provide the guidance to you, and it's important that your financial people really work hard to align their budgets with those systems, so that we can finalize that budget and execute your budget modification and your grant agreement modification as soon as possible and as successfully as possible. This is an example of how that format will look. You will see year one is 2023, year two is 2024, year five is 2025, and you can see how those numbers need to be reflected in those budgets. You could see on the narrative also how those need to be written for each of the years. But at the end of the day, the total is going to be for the 3 years combined, right? So that's where things can get a little complicated, right? Because there's a very particular process that needs to be followed in order to make those budgets successful. The last set of documents that need to be submitted, these are legal documents that are required by GATA, the conflict of interest disclosure and the mandatory disclosure. Please make sure those are done properly, they're signed, they're dated, because otherwise our legal department will not allow us to proceed with executing budget modifications and also grant agreement modifications without receiving new conflict of interest disclosures or mandatory disclosures. So here are how those documents look. I mean, you've seen them before. As I mentioned, they have a place where you sign them and date them, and all of that needs to be properly done. It will save us a huge amount of time, and we don't have to be doing back and forth related to these documents. Sometimes they're missing information, sometimes they're not properly filled out, sometimes they're not signed or dated correctly, and then we have to do a lot of back and forth, and it will save us a lot of time if we could ensure these are done properly. So any questions about the documents that need to be submitted as part of the renewal process before we go on to the next section? Any questions, Edwin, in the chat?
There aren't any in the chat right now, Norman.
Okay, great. So if you have any questions right now, would like to unmute your line, you can certainly do that at this particular moment in time. If you don't have any questions, it's fine. You can always listen to the webinar again once it's posted on the partner guide, or certainly you can reach out to your programmatic grant manager with questions. Okay, so this is the last section of our webinar today. We're going to talk about the timelines for submission, and then also obviously emphasize some of the key things that need to be included. So as I mentioned earlier, our goal this year is that all executed grant agreements and modifications are done by, apologies, it says there January 1st. It should say January 31st, 2026. As you can see in the previous bullet, we're going to process them starting December 1st through January 31st, 2026. That's when the grant agreement and budget modification execution is scheduled to happen. And our goal is to have them all done by January 31st, 2026. But as I mentioned earlier, none of this is possible without getting all your documents completed on time and in good order, particularly your budget. So let's look at the timeline here. The first round of invitations for renewal are going to go out on September 24, literally in less than 2 weeks. We are, as I mentioned right now, working on September monthly compliance reports. We will use the results of those monthly compliance reports, the compliance score, and then the first round of invitations will go out on the 24th. Those grantees that are invited to renew in that first round will have to submit their documents to us by October the 3rd, 2025. So that's when they will need to submit their documents. The second round of invitations will go out on October 17th. That's after we finalize the monthly compliance reports in October. If in September, like I mentioned earlier, you are not invited to renew, you will get a letter indicating that you were not invited to renew, but that you have a second opportunity, and give you some guidance on what needs to be done in order for you to potentially reach that threshold for renewal in October. If you are invited, if you do reach that threshold in October and not invited to renew, you will receive a notification or letter on 10/17/2025 indicating that that you have been invited to renew. All the individuals, all the grantees that are not invited to renew will also get notification that they were not invited to renew. If you do receive a notification in October, the documents will be due, the second round documents for renewal will be due into us on the 24th. of October 2025. Um, we are scheduling the budget workshop. As I mentioned earlier, for those that get offer renewal, we really need to make sure that those budgets are finalized during negotiations. We will flag certain things to you that you need to address. If any of those items are pending, you will go to a budget workshop on the 17th of November. And it's a couple of hours working through all the issues that we have with budgets. And the final budget will be due to us by 11/21. Right after we have the final budgets, we have to present our renewal proposals to our director's office, the director of DCEO, who will then approve or deny for us to renew grantees. If she approves for us to proceed with the renewals, we will start the grant agreement and budget modification renewal process on 12/1. And as I said, that will run through the end of January. The goal is that by January 31st, 2026, all those modifications, budget modifications and grant agreement modifications are done so that you can then go through your administrative onboarding in February and then start your programming right after that. So that's the timeline that we have. It's very, very important again that this process is followed um, as best possible so that we can then ensure that we have a successful process for renewing your grant agreements, renewing your budget modifications. Any questions, Edwin, from in the chat related to this?
No questions right now, Norman.
Okay, are there any questions? If you have any questions, you want to mute your line, you can certainly do that now. I can tell you that we are going through our NOFO process. Our goal is for our network to be 45 providers by January 1st, 2026. Right now we have 37. We're hoping that we can renew the majority of the providers that we have in our network. We did receive over 40 applications from all over the state of Illinois of different entities wanting to be part of the Illinois Works Network. So I encourage you to work hard to address any issues that you may have in compliance so that you can then be offered renewal through the process I just described. That is all the content that we have for you today. As I mentioned, this webinar is being recorded. We will make the webinar available in the next day or two on our partner website. We will also make the slide deck available for all of you. If you do not have any more questions or you don't have any questions at this particular moment in time, I encourage you as you're going through this information, if you come up with questions, please reach out to your programmatic grant manager and they'll be more than happy to answer any questions they may have. Any final questions before we go, Edwin?
Not any in the chat right now, Norman.
Okay, great. So if nobody has any questions at this particular moment in time, I want to thank you for joining the webinar. Thank you for the team. Shar is also with us today. Some of the other members of the Illinois Works team. Thanks for joining us. We appreciate you taking the time, and we really hope to see you receive an offer for renewal and then proceed to renewing your funding. Okay, I hope you have a good rest of your day. Take care.